Title IX.
Title IX.
Title IX.
Title IX, it's just a short clause in a law that requires equal opportunity for women in all aspects of education, including sports. It changed everything for female athletes.
Throughout American history, women have not always been treated equally by the law and have oftentimes been denied job opportunities and equal pay. However, gender equality took a huge step forward in 1972 when Congress passed Title IX, a law that broke barriers by stating that a person may not be excluded from federally funded opportunities on the basis of their gender. 1 year after Title IX was passed, tennis player Billie Jean King defeated Bobby Riggs in the much publicized match, the Battle of the Sexes. Through her victory, King broke barriers for women athletes and inspired many to embrace Title IX. The height of the women's liberation movement came in the 1970s. It was marked with events like the passage of Title IX and Billie Jean King's performance, which reinforced the capability of women in society. The women's liberation movement was built upon years of women's pain and struggle, along with a number of important barriers that were broken throughout American history. Let's start from the beginning. In the 19th century, 95% of women stayed at home. Most American women spent their lives doing housework taking care of the children, while men were employed and earned money for the household. During this time period, women typically existed to serve their husbands and their families. Women also met significant resistance for the most basic rights. In 1866, the 14th Amendment was passed by Congress, with citizens and voters defined as male in the Constitution. 1920 was a game changer for women. In 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, ensuring women the right to vote. Then, World War II came along, which changed so much for women. Just a few months before Pearl Harbor, more than 80% of American men and women declared that it was wrong for wives to work outside the home if their husbands were employed. Then, in the 1940s, while men went to war in World War II, women were needed to work in factories and perform jobs previously held by men. This massive migration of women into the workforce helped to set the stage for women's rights, because once women left the home and performed jobs, they demonstrated that they were capable of doing the work normally reserved for men. This also changed the role of women because many women did not want to continue to maintain their previous roles as homemakers. In the 1960s, America reevaluated discrimination that existed throughout society, including discrimination against women. Protesters were active in demanding change. The 1960s youth did not want to tolerate old norms and laws that were unfair and discriminatory. The 1960s would bring landmark legislation to improve the lives of women. In 1963, the Equal Pay Act was passed in Congress, promising equitable wages for the same work, regardless of the race, color, religion, national origin, or sex of the worker. The following year, in 1964, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act passed, prohibiting sex discrimination in employment. Just a few years later, in 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed an executive order prohibiting sex discrimination by government contractors and required affirmative action plans for hiring women. As the 1970s began, many women joined the fight to improve their lives and establish equal rights for women, because at the end of the 1960s, there was still a lot of work left to do. During the 1960s and 1970s, one of those women fighting for women's rights was the #1 tennis player in the world, Billie Jean King. Billie Jean King fought to break barriers between the sexes, and she campaigned tirelessly for women's rights and for parity in women's sports. In 1972, she turned her focus towards Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which would prohibit sex discrimination in all federally funded school programs, including sports. Billie Jean King demonstrated tremendous courage and leadership on this issue, and testified in support of Title IX, explaining that it was needed in order for girls and women to advance in their sport. In 1972, Title IX was passed with Billie Jean King's help. Title IX was sponsored and primarily written by Congressional Representative Patsy Mink from Hawaii. This important law consists of only 37 words that changed history. It states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. The passage of Title IX was a game changer for women. After all, equality in education ultimately leads to greater opportunities for women in the workplace and in society. Title IX was certainly landmark legislation that improved the lives of women and has had a significant impact on our society as a whole. Title IX broke barriers that enabled women to break barriers of their own. Title IX gave women access to the education they deserved, which enabled women to reach new heights in society. To imagine how life has changed for schoolgirls in America since Title IX, consider this fact. Before Title IX, only 1 in 30 girls played high school sports. Today, 42.7% of all high school sports participants are girls. Before Title IX, young women were not admitted into many colleges and universities. Athletic scholarships for women were rare, and math and science were areas of studies that were reserved for boys. Schoolgirls square danced instead of playing sports. Girls studied home economics instead of training for male-oriented, higher-paying trades like auto mechanics. Back then, girls could become teachers and nurses, but rarely would they become doctors and principals. In higher education, women were rarely awarded tenure, and even more rarely were they appointed college presidents. Prior to the passage of Title IX, schools openly discriminated against women. Even though this law was passed, society still discredited the value of women. So, in 1973, in order to inspire people to accept women as equals and to embrace Title IX, Billie Jean King played a tennis match against Bobby Riggs, a former men's tennis champion and a proud male chauvinist pig. This was not just an ordinary tennis match. This was an internationally televised tennis match that was promoted as the Battle of the Sexes. This tennis match took place in the Houston Astrodome, a football stadium filled up to watch an exhibition tennis match. An estimated 50 million people in the United States and more than 90 million people worldwide watched the match. In this exhibition, Billie Jean King won the match, and her win is widely considered to be a milestone in the public acceptance of women's professional tennis. More broadly, her win helped to demonstrate the talents and abilities of women. Because of Title IX, schools are prohibited from treating students differently on the basis of sex. Because of Title IX, both men and women are equally allowed to take advantage of any course of study regardless of gender stereotypes about traditionally male or female coursework or professions. Because of Title IX, women can now sign up for plumbing, welding, engineering, and other classes that were previously restricted, and males can sign up for nursing, teaching, and other traditionally female classes. Now, more women are attending college and earning degrees than ever before. For example, when Title IX was signed into law in 1972, women earned just 7% of all law degrees and 9% of all medical degrees. Now, women earn 47% of all law degrees and 48% of all medical degrees. To better understand what playing sports was like growing up before Title IX, consider comments by Nancy Cole, a retired high school physical education teacher. You maybe practiced twice a week for maybe half an hour. Then you played 3 games during the season. At the end, you went to what was called a play day. You'd play 3 innings against one team, then 3 innings against the other team. Then when it was over, you'd have milk and cookies with all the other teams. In 1971 to 1972, fewer than 30,000 women participated in college sports. Now, 216,378 women play college sports, more than 7 times the pre-Title IX rate. Moreover, for the last 20 years, there are more women's college teams in the NCAA than men's teams. That is real progress. The work of Billie Jean King to make Title IX a reality and her widely publicized victory in the Battle of the Sexes broke down the walls that kept women from having access to educational and athletic opportunities. It also demonstrated to both men and women that women had more capabilities than they were previously credited for. This understanding has enabled women to not only advance in school, but throughout society as a whole. The opportunities and experiences made available to women have enabled women to grow in ways that were previously unimaginable. But we are still not done today. It is time for both women and men to break barriers for our sisters, our mothers, and our daughters. Is true equality too much to ask for?